Prologue: darkness. A void so vast, so consuming, that even time itself felt non-existent. I had always scoffed at the idea of the light at the end of the tunnel, that fleeting illusion people spoke of after surviving near-death experiences. The way they would awaken, drenched in cold sweat, whispering, "I saw the light," as if they had glimpsed something divine. Yet now, as I drift in this abyss, I see it. A distant glow, cold and unfeeling, shimmering at the end of an ever-tightening tunnel. How did it come to this? Darkness pressed in, thick and suffocating. The world was quiet now. Too quiet. Something was wrong. A weight bore down on my chest. My limbs felt heavy, sluggish, like they no longer belonged to me. The ground beneath me was cold, unforgiving. The scent of blood lingered in the air, sharp and unmistakable. My blood. Flashes of memory flickered through the haze. The sound of steel clashing. The whisper of footsteps in the dark. A presence, no, more than one. Shadows closing in. I had been careless. Too exhausted. Too slow. It should have been over. The battle had ended, my body broken but still standing. And yet, in that fragile moment of stillness, when the dust had begun to settle, they came. The first strike was unseen. A seal. A poison. My chakra, unresponsive. My vision blurred. Their movements were precise, calculated. No hesitation. No wasted effort. A blade. A whisper of wind. The sharp sting of steel piercing flesh. They knew. They had waited for this moment. The world tilted. My body sank, unresisting, into the shattered earth. The night swallowed me whole. The world around me dimmed, the weight of my own body pressing me down into the shattered earth. There had been too many who wanted me dead. Too many who saw my existence as a threat. Perhaps, in the end, it does not matter. A dead man has no say in the affairs of the living. Perhaps this was how it was always meant to end. And yet, the light remained. Growing closer, brighter. A warmth, unfamiliar yet strangely comforting, enveloped me as the void around me gave way to something new. Was this death? Or was it something else entirely? Well, as much as I want to figure out how I died, it doesn't seem like I have much of a choice. I can't change the past. I can't fight back against something I can't even see. No choice but to go along with it. TCH. There better not be some ridiculous choir of babies with wings singing at the end of this tunnel. That would be a cruel joke. The light kept growing, swallowing the darkness, pulling me forward whether I wanted it or not. Then, congratulations, sir and madam. He's a healthy boy. A sharp sound. A voice, clear yet distant, like an echo traveling through water. I tried to open my eyes, but the light was blinding. My vision blurred, my senses overwhelmed. My body, small, weak, unfamiliar. No, something's off. As my eyes struggled to adjust, the first thing I saw was the vague outline of a man standing nearby. His figure was hazy, but his clothes stood out, something red, a tracksuit. What the hell? This wasn't the afterlife. This was something else entirely. And I had a sinking feeling that my problems were only just beginning. Was I just born? No, that's impossible. There has to be some mistake. Hold him a bit further away, dear, I can't see. A woman's voice said, warm yet exhausted. My vision was still adjusting, but I could make out two blurry figures. One had long red hair, and the other, a man, wore what seemed to be grey clothing, his hair also a shade of red. Something was wrong. The air felt different. Unfamiliar voices, weak limbs, my body, small, fragile. I tried to move. Nothing. Panic surged, but I forced it down. Think. Assess. What happened to me? Where am I? He's beautiful, the woman's voice murmured softly. Through my still blurry vision, I could barely make out her outline, a warm presence, tender and full of love. He has your hair. The man's voice followed, deep yet gentle. The last flickers of light danced in my eyes before my vision sharpened, revealing the figures before me. A couple. A man with piercing blue eyes and grey hair, not red, as I had first thought. His sharp features, strong jaw, and thick brows gave him an air of discipline, almost strict, yet there was a softness in his gaze. Beside him stood a woman with long red hair cascading to her chest, her emerald green eyes shimmering with warmth. She smiled, bright, gentle, and full of motherly love. I had seen people frozen in fear, bodies stiff from injury, minds shattered under pressure. But this was different. My body wouldn't move. Paralysis. No, something else. Something deeper. I wasn't just trapped. I was powerless. He has your eyes, honey, the woman said, turning to her husband with a fond look. So that meant, I had inherited his eyes. What kind of situation is this? Why is she speaking to me like I'm a child? No, like I'm a baby. Was this some kind of deception? An illusion, or was there something else at play here? Who were these people? And more importantly, where the hell was I? Hi, little Lucifer. I'm your daddy. Can you say, Dada? The man's voice rang out, unnervingly high-pitched, almost sing-songy, like someone trying to rile up a dog. What kind of sick joke is this? Who does this? What kind of people talk to me like this? Like I'm some helpless infant? Is this a new form of torture? Some kind of experiment? Something about them felt off. Their tone, their expressions. There was something unnatural about all of this. I blinked, still adjusting to the overwhelming sensory input, as the man grinned at me expectantly. Ray, he was just born, the woman sighed, her tone heavy with exasperation. I see, she's the voice of reason in this house. The man, apparently named Ray, let out a sheepish laugh, scratching the back of his head in apology. Are they giants? No, that doesn't make sense. First, that kind of thing doesn't exist. Second, their proportions are normal, nothing unnatural. Then what? Some kind of illusion? No, there's no sign of that either. The scale feels wrong. I feel wrong. A shift in movement caught my attention. Not far from the bed, another woman stood patiently, dressed in simple yet clean garments, her sleeves rolled up. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her gaze flicking between me and the red-haired woman. A caretaker? A servant? No, a wet nurse. That realization sent a chill down my spine. If there were no other infants around, then what did that mean for me? A sick joke? Some twisted experiment? Had I been reduced to something lesser, a newborn, or worse, lobotomized? No, that couldn't be. Even a degenerate like Orochimaru would find such a fate pathetic. Then, the only conclusion left, I was that baby. The red-haired woman, my mother, gently caressed my cheek, her touch light and warm. Thank you for coming on such short notice, she said to the nurse, her voice laced with gratitude. It's no trouble at all, my lady, the woman replied with a respectful nod before shifting her focus to me. I frowned internally. So, this is what it feels like to be utterly helpless, trapped in a baby's body, unable to move, speak, or even feed myself without assistance. Just great. Ray, still beaming, leaned in again, his blue eyes alight with excitement. Come on, little guy, just one, Dada, I believe in you. I simply stared at him. He believed in me. What did he think I was, a prodigy of speech? I couldn't even hold my own head up properly. The red-haired woman, my mother, sighed once more, shaking her head. Ray, enough. Let the baby rest. With a dramatic groan, Ray slumped back. Fine, fine. But one day, he's gonna say it first. I highly doubted that. Never mind. First impressions could be deceiving. And judging by the way things were going, my surroundings seemed normal enough, or at least, as normal as they could be in my current situation. Looking around, I took in the details of the house. The walls were made of stone, giving off a sturdy yet slightly rustic feel. Clothes hung neatly on racks, but what caught my attention the most was the sight of gauntlets and chest plates, armor designed for sword fighting. I recognized them immediately. These weren't decorative. They were functional, meant for combat training. They reminded me of the ones used in the Land of Iron, a snow-covered country nestled between the Three Wolves Mountains. Unlike the Five Great Nations, the Land of Iron remained neutral in conflicts, untouched by shinobi wars. It had long been agreed upon that ninja would not interfere with their affairs, as their warriors followed a completely different path, one of samurai, devotion to daimyo, and unwavering ideals. Unlike shinobi, who adapted their skills into ninjutsu, these samurai fought with pure technique, discipline, and strength. If I was truly in a land like this, then my new reality might be vastly different from anything I had known before. My wandering thoughts were interrupted when I noticed a lone candle sitting precariously on the side of the room. That's dangerous. One wrong move, and it could tip over, setting the stray clothing nearby ablaze. I mentally noted the fire hazard, but there was nothing I could do about it. No chakra, no jutsu, no movement. Because I was still just a baby, days passed, then weeks, seasons trickled by at an agonizingly slow pace. While my life in this new world was calm, that didn't mean it wasn't filled with struggles. Although my mother, Alice, was gentle and kind-hearted, she ruled the household with an unshakable authority. She was the one who held the reins in the family, ensuring order and discipline. My father, Reynolds, was a charismatic and dependable man, when he wasn't acting like an overgrown child. Despite their quirks, I was grateful. Unlike my previous life, where loss and hardship had followed me at every turn, I had been born into a loving home. But even in a peaceful environment, I faced struggles unlike anything I had encountered before. Because no amount of skill, intelligence, or experience could prepare me for the worst part of infancy. A complete lack of control. Over my limbs. Over my movements. Over my bodily functions. TCH. Pathetic. I had just soiled myself. Alice moved swiftly, her actions smooth and practiced. "Ah, Lucifer, you've gone popo again," she cooed as she removed the soiled cloth. Humiliating, but there was nothing I could do. My body, weak, undeveloped, fragile, was nothing more than a prison. I hated it. But embarrassment? No, that was pointless. Sasuke Uchiha did not dwell on shame. Instead, I focused on the only thing that mattered, regaining control. Most babies begin crawling between 7 and 10 months, though not all move in the same way. That meant I had a long road ahead. A frustrating, agonizing wait, trapped in this powerless form. But time was something I had learned to master. I had endured years of training, pushing my body beyond its limits, honing my control to perfection. This would be no different. If it took 7 months, then I would move in 5. If others needed time to strengthen their bodies, then I would force mine to adapt faster. I would not accept helplessness. I clenched my tiny fists. Even if I had to relearn everything from the ground up, I would not remain weak. I was Sasuke Uchiha, and I would reclaim my strength. Somewhere in the bustling marketplace I had been transported to a world that felt both ancient and surreal, as if it existed outside the flow of time. Smoke curled lazily through the air, carrying the mingling scents of spices, sweat, and something faintly metallic. Around me, the marketplace pulsed with life, a chaotic symphony of merchants shouting, coins clinking, and the constant murmur of bartering voices. Canopies of patchwork fabric swayed overhead, casting fragmented shade under the relentless sun. No shinobi, no warriors, no lingering presence of killing intent. And yet, something about this place unsettled me. It was reminiscent of Konoha in certain ways, bustling, structured, thriving, but off in ways I couldn't yet define. The buildings had curved, sloping roofs, large courtyards, and were often made of red and black materials, emphasizing power and fire. It was a design choice that spoke of strength, authority, and legacy. Konoha's architecture, in contrast, had curved rooftops, wooden structures, and paper lanterns that gave the village a sense of warmth and tradition. Similar, yet different. A place that felt both familiar and alien at the same time. Nearby, a merchant stood behind a wooden stall, holding up vials filled with swirling, murky liquids. Elixirs. Boosts endurance. Just 2 ban. His voice rang out, brimming with enthusiasm, his grin practiced and confident. Elixirs. My first instinct was skepticism. The vials looked questionable at best, and his performance was too polished, an act refined through trial and error, preying on the desperate and the gullible. A scam, most likely. But even scams revealed something about a world's understanding of power. My little Lucifer must be tired already, Alice, my mother, apparently, murmured, glancing down at me with a fond expression. There was a quiet gentleness to her, something steady and warm. It was disarming. Nearby, a woman in a grey t-shirt and a long skirt stepped forward. "I'll take 3 elixirs for my husband," she said, pulling out a pouch of coins. Her gaze was sharp, tinged with something between impatience and desperate hope. Desperation made people reckless. A universal truth, no matter the world. Alice adjusted her grip on me. "How about we head home now? I think that would be best." Her arms were warm, her steady heartbeat a quiet rhythm against me. Even so, my mind remained restless. I needed more information about this world, its people, its dangers. Comfort was irrelevant. Understanding was everything. Ever since that day at the marketplace, I had spent my time carefully assessing my surroundings, analyzing every detail. Knowledge is strength. Weeks had passed, and by now, I was confident that I had a firm grasp on what to expect from this new life. Or so I thought. A familiar figure entered my field of vision, a grey-haired man with a wide, ridiculous grin. Ray, my father. He leaned over my crib, his face brimming with excitement. "Daddy's home. How's my little man doing?" Without warning, he scooped me up, lifting me high into the air. As usual, I didn't react. No laughter, no kicking my feet in excitement, just a blank stare. But that didn't seem to faze him. Strangely, he was in an unusually good mood, even though it had been weeks since he left his post. A military man, yet he carried himself like a carefree fool. Alice stood nearby, watching us with a curious expression. What made him so happy? She seemed to wonder. Before I could finish that thought, before I could silently beg to be returned to the safety of my mother's arms, I was suddenly tossed into the air, not dangerously high, but high enough that my instincts screamed at me to react, to twist my body mid-air, to stabilize my landing, to counteract the helplessness of this infant body. But I couldn't. My limbs were weak, my reflexes unresponsive. For the first time in my life, I was truly powerless. And I hated it. Whoosh. Oh, hell no, I soared upward, weightless for a brief moment, my stomach twisting at the sudden loss of control. Ray. My mother's sharp voice cut through the air. What are you going to do if you drop him? Her panic was justified. I, however, had already resigned myself to my fate. As expected, of such a fragile body. Then, just as quickly, I began to fall. For a brief moment, a bitter thought crossed my mind. If I splashed my head against the hard stone floor and died, at least I'd be free from this fall. But no, fate was cruel. Ray caught me, barely. His hands fumbled before securing a firmer grip, as if he hadn't entirely thought this through. My heart pounded in my chest, my instincts screaming at me to react, to stabilize my descent, to brace for impact. But I could do nothing. This infant body was weak, useless. For someone like me, who had always valued strength, who had built his entire existence around power and control, this was the greatest humiliation. As an adult, I had been one of the most powerful shinobi in history. Now, I couldn't even lift my own head properly. Trapped, helpless, dependent on others for everything. Was this what Naruto felt like, growing up? Weak, unable to fight back against the circumstances forced upon him. Forced to rely on others even when he wanted nothing more than to stand on his own. The thought made my stomach churn. Meanwhile, my father. Laughing. Loud, shameless, completely unapologetic. His laughter echoed through the room, deep and full of amusement, as if nearly dropping his own son was the funniest thing in the world. I can't stand it. Alice exhaled sharply, rubbing her temples. Ray, I swear, if you drop him, you're sleeping outside. But Ray, ever the fool, only grinned. Come on, Alice. You worry too much. See, the little guy's fine. Fine. I had just been tossed through the air like some kind of plaything, my heart nearly giving out from the sheer indignity of it. To think, I, Sasuke Uchiha, had been reduced to this. Ha. My father did this when I was younger. Ray beamed down at me with a joy so intense, you'd think he had just uncovered some grand family tradition. He seemed proud. Of what? I had no idea. Had he received a promotion? A commendation? Or was this just his natural state, a complete fool? Before I could dwell on it, he lifted me into the air again. Not again. Look, dear. I think our little boy is having fun, he announced, voice brimming with enthusiasm. Fun? I deadpanned. And yet, his sheer excitement, the genuine warmth in his expression, it was infectious. For a brief moment, I almost smiled. Almost. But if I encouraged this behavior, it would never end. I needed to put a stop to this. Wah. Whoosh. My dear father spun me around like some lifeless doll, completely oblivious to my suffering. Whoosh. Reality blurred into a nauseating swirl of colors. My father's obnoxious laughter echoed in my ears, as irritating as a swarm of cicadas. Damn it. My own body is betraying me. I glared at him, or at least, I tried to. The best I could do was furrow my tiny brows. My stomach churned, my head spun. If this kept up, my body would react on its own. If I threw up, at least he'd have to stop. A disgusting option, but an effective one. Another possibility flickered in my mind, crying. If I cried, surely Alice would intervene. But no, that was a line I refused to cross. Uchiha Sasuke would not cry. Not for something as pathetic as this. Whoosh, whoosh. I clenched my fists. I once fought gods. Now, I couldn't even stop myself from being tossed like a damn toy. TCH. If he didn't stop soon, he would regret it. Clang. A loud ringing sound echoed through the room as my mother smacked my father with a pan. Ray let go of me instantly. Just like that, I was free. Before I could even process what had happened, my mother caught me, her arms wrapping around me like a warm, protective shield. There's an expression, a mother's love for her child is like nothing else in the world. Even so, wah, the contents of my stomach erupted onto the floor like a flood during a stormy night. Disgusting. But at least now he'd have to stop. A tragic outcome for the floor. And for Ray. But Ray, caught up in his excitement, didn't seem to notice. I've been given charge over a squadron. His voice was filled with unshakable pride. It's a big responsibility, Alice. This war. It's the key to our future. Alice rushed forward, pulling me close, her grip tightening. You can't just. Ray, still grinning, didn't seem to realize the panic he'd caused. His chest puffed out with pride. This is it, Alice. The chance I've been waiting for. I'll make sure we never have to worry about anything again. We'll be respected, honored. I'll bring back everything you and Lucifer deserve. Alice stared at him, a storm of emotions in her eyes: pride, fear, anger. Ray, you talk about honor and respect, but what about us? What about Lucifer? Ray's grin faltered, just slightly. I want to make you proud, Alice. I want to give our family everything. This promotion, it's not just a job, it's a mission. I'm going to prove myself on the battlefield. I'll fight for our future, for you, for Lucifer. I won't let anything happen to us. Alice's lips pressed into a thin line. She knew this was what he wanted. But with the baby in her arms, and war on the horizon, the weight of it all suddenly felt suffocating. I remained silent. War. A foolish concept driven by men who sought glory. I had seen it firsthand, bodies torn apart, lives lost for the sake of ambition. And yet, Ray spoke of it like it was an opportunity. I had been called a hero once, but no amount of victory ever erased the bloodstains on my hands. And this fool wanted to chase after it willingly. TCH. How naive. I see it's happening again, seeing Itachi's sacrifice and the war's devastation. Sasuke did not believe in simply maintaining the status quo. He declared his own revolution, to destroy the old system by eliminating the five cage and becoming a dictator-like figure, a true Hokage, who would guide the world through fear. However, his battle with Naruto at the Valley of the End changed everything. He saw Naruto's unyielding will, the power of bonds that he once rejected, and the reality that his revolution would only continue the cycle of violence he despised. Ultimately, he abandoned the idea of forceful restructuring. The battle at the Valley of the End had ended, finally. For a brief moment, there was only silence, no more clashing of jutsu, no more desperate attacks. Just two warriors who had given everything. Naruto and I, broken, yet alive. His breathing was ragged, his body barely holding itself together. My own wasn't much better. An arm gone. Chakra drained, wounds deep. We had nothing left. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension ease, if only for a second. That was their moment. The first sign was the flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. Subtle, efficient. Shadows breaking away from the trees. Then, a paralysis tag burned against my skin. Too fast. Too precise. They had planned this. Another figure blurred into motion. Smoke exploded around me, tainted, laced with something. My lungs burned. Poison. I forced my fingers into a seal. Nothing. My chakra pathways were blocked, targeted precisely. Paralysis, suppression, poison. They had planned for this. They were prepared for the Rinnegan. A secondary seal ignited, chakra suppression. My vision blurred as the Rinnegan dimmed, its power forcibly locked away. They knew exactly what to target. A second later, cold steel slid between my ribs. Deep. Precise. Not meant to wound, meant to kill. Root. There was no hesitation in their movements, no wasted strikes. Danzo's ghosts, still moving long after their master's death. A boot pressed against my back, forcing me down. A kunai flashed in the moonlight. I barely heard Naruto's voice, distant, strained, but something was wrong. His chakra, his presence, was fading too. A second wave of smoke. Seals flaring against his skin, suppression. A final strike. My body moved, too slow. The blade cut deep, a cold finality in its path. My vision swam, darkness closing in, unacceptable. And yet, inevitable. Yet, out of all my accomplishments, my battles, my victories, my survival through impossible odds, I had never been as proud as I was at this moment. Not because of anything I had done, but because of the message Alice held in her hands. A sharp noise against the wooden window frame made Alice flinch. Instinctively, she turned, just in time to see a bird perched gracefully on the sill, its dark feathers ruffling against the breeze. A rolled parchment was tied to its leg, the wax seal bearing a symbol that burned with the colors of fire. Her breath caught. A letter, she gasped, rushing forward. Her hands trembled as she untied the parchment, her pulse hammering against her ribs. The seal, it was unmistakable. Ray, her husband, the father of her child. For a moment, she hesitated. Letters from the front were unpredictable, they carried either hope or heartbreak, victory or loss. Taking a deep breath, Alice carefully broke the seal. The faint scent of ink and parchment filled the air as she unfolded the letter, her fingers gripping the edges as if steadying herself. Then, she began to read aloud. Her voice was steady, but even Lucifer, barely able to hold up his own head, could sense the emotions welling in her chest. To my family, I hope this letter reaches you safely. I do not know when I will be able to return, but I needed to write to you. There is much to say, though I suspect some things you already know. And Alice, I know that no words of mine will ease your worry, but please, do not fear for me. It has been weeks since I left home as a simple soldier, eager to serve the Fire Nation, eager to make you proud. But war is not what I imagined. There is no honor in the way men fall. No glory in the smell of burned earth. And yet, in the middle of all this ruin, I found something worth fighting for. Our first mission should have been simple. An outpost deep in enemy territory, an easy victory, they told us. But we were deceived. The Earth Kingdom was waiting. We walked into their ambush like blind men, and before I could even react, my captain lay dead. The men beside me, men I trained with, laughed with, were scattered, some never to rise again. I thought of retreat. Any sane man would have. But then I saw Sergeant Tenzu, bloodied, barely standing. If I left him, he would die. So I did what I had to do. I fought. I do not remember how many I burned that day, only that I kept moving until I dragged him to safety. We lost that battle, but we swore we would return. The days that followed taught me the truth of war. Survival is the only rule. I learned to trust my squad, to fight with cunning, not just strength. When we took back the outpost, we did not charge blindly. We made them fear us before they ever saw us. I never expected to be noticed. I never sought leadership. But the general pulled me aside and said, "You are no longer just a soldier, Corporal Ray." And for the first time in my life, I felt something settle in my chest, pride. Alice, I swore I would give our family a better life, and this is the first step. The higher-ups have taken notice. If I continue proving myself, I may be invited to the Fire Lord's palace, to stand before those who shape our nation's future. If we win another decisive battle, I may be granted command of a colony. Lucifer, my son. If you are old enough to understand these words, know this. I fight so that you will never have to hold a sword. I fight so that our name will carry weight beyond the battlefield. One day, you will understand why I made these choices. And yet, there is something else. A feeling I cannot shake. Perhaps it is a soldier's instinct, sharpened by war. Or perhaps it is the whispers in my mind when I think of you, my son. I do not know why, but I feel as though you are already watching, already listening. Lucifer, my son, you are not like other children, are you? Take care of each other. I will write again when I can. Ray. Alice wiped her eyes as she finished reading, her breath shaky. She folded the letter carefully, feeling a heavy weight in her chest. Sasuke sat silently by her side, his little hands clenched into fists, his wide eyes fixed on the parchment in his mother's hands. One thought crossed his mind: war is a cruel thing. Alice gently placed a hand on her son's head, her fingers brushing through his soft hair. Despite his tender age, there was something about Lucifer that made her pause, something that made her think he understood more than he let on. Perhaps it was the way he looked up at her with those dark blue eyes, or the subtle shift in his tiny hands, as though he was aware of the world around him in ways a child shouldn't be. She forced a smile, her heart heavy with worry. The ache in her chest seemed to grow with every passing moment. But as she gazed at her baby boy, she tried to believe in the words she spoke, hoping that her conviction would reach him. "My love, he will come back to us." Outside, the messenger hawk ruffled its feathers, awaiting its next task. Alice took a deep breath. With renewed determination, she sat down to write a reply to Ray, hoping her words would bring him comfort and remind him of the life waiting for him at home. The Fire Lord? I see. That explains his happiness. In this world, promotions were clearly tied to status and power. A chance to rise through the ranks, not unlike how shinobi advanced in Konoha. I couldn't help but compare it to my past life. I remembered when rank was an obsession for some shinobi, especially Naruto. Back when we were just Chunin, he had been so desperate to climb the ranks, always talking about becoming Hokage. "I'm gonna be Hokage, Databayo," only to get smacked in the head by Sakura for being an idiot. Good old times. That was a time when our ambitions were simple, when our battles were just spars, and when our greatest worries were passing the next Chunin exam. Now, those days felt like a distant dream. I was no longer Sasuke Uchiha, the man once feared as the shadow of the revolution. I was Lucifer, a mere infant, in a world where my father was the son of a corporal, where the Fire Lord's word was law, and where war still dictated a man's worth. For now, all I could do was observe, learn, and prepare for whatever this new life had in store for me. Because if war was still the measure of greatness in this world, then it was only a matter of time before I was dragged into it. And when that time came, I would be ready. Months had passed since my father's grand announcement. With his promotion to corporal, he had been away at war, fighting for our so-called pride. In his absence, the house had settled into a routine, one that revolved entirely around me. Mother worried. Constantly. Every little noise I made, every stumble, every pause in my breathing while I slept, it was as if she expected me to vanish the moment she looked away. It was suffocating. And then there were the gifts. Every month, Without fail, another messenger arrived with some sentimental token from my father, a trinket, a fire lily, a hand-carved wooden figurine. Each one came with some ridiculously sweet message attached. For my beloved Alice and our precious son, may this gift bring you joy until our return. I was sick of it. If they truly suspected that I wasn't normal, why keep showering me with affection? Why act as if I was some delicate little treasure that needed constant reassurance? But despite all that, I found something else to take pride in. Something monumental. I can crawl. It may seem like nothing to others, but to me, this was a breakthrough, the first step toward walking, and walking meant mobility, and mobility meant freedom. Determined, I dashed forward, well, as much as one could dash while crawling. But even in this moment of triumph, I could feel my mother's nervous gaze burning into my back. Be careful, Lucifer. Make sure not to hit your head on that corner, Alice called out, her voice laced with worry. Ha! Nonsense. I have survived far worse than this in my past life. The Fourth Shinobi War, the battle at the Valley of the End, near-death encounters that had shaped me into the warrior I once was. A baby's journey to mobility, child's play. No, literally, I'm an infant. Thump. Or so I thought. Before I even realized what happened, my head smacked straight into a mirror. I blinked, stunned. I had been so focused on my mother's reaction, so preoccupied with proving my independence, that I completely failed to notice the giant reflective obstacle in front of me. Silence. Then, heat rushed to my face. I was blushing. Not from pain, but from pure embarrassment. The great Sasuke Uchiha. Defeated. By a mirror. Alice gasped and rushed toward me, her worried expression full of motherly concern. Before I could even process my shame, I was scooped into her arms. Oh, sweetie, she murmured, pressing my tiny body against her warmth. Are you hurt? I scowled internally, frustration bubbling inside me. God damn it, this is still so embarrassing. Even now, I wasn't used to being trapped in the body of an infant. Alice glanced outside, noticing how late it had gotten. It's probably best for you to have an early bedtime. I want you to grow up to be a big, strong boy. Night had already fallen, the soft glow of lanterns flickering beyond the window. Then, I felt it, the warmth of her lips pressing gently against my forehead. Sweet dreams, my little Lucifer, Alice whispered. I listened to the creaking of the wooden floor as she tiptoed out of the room, her footsteps fading into the quiet night. A few seconds later, the door shut behind her. Only for the wind to push it back open slightly, leaving a small gap. Perfect. I opened my eyes. Beyond the wooden bars of my crib, my prison, a dim glow seeped through the cracks of the door. Mission start. I pushed myself up into a sitting position, my tiny limbs straining against the movement. Step 1. Complete. Now for the real challenge. Grabbing my green blanket, the one that covered my so-called bed, I knew I needed to break my fall first. If I landed too hard, I'd wake Alice, and this mission would be over before it even began. With as much coordination as my infant body allowed, I draped the blanket over the crib's edge, pushing it down until it formed a fluffy landing zone below. Good. That should work. Now for the hard part. Gripping the top rail, I heaved my tiny body upward. Rumble. My foot barely found purchase on the edge. Rumble. I gritted my gums, since I didn't have teeth yet, and forced my body forward. Then, shit, I was falling. For a split second, all I could feel was the rush of air. Then, bam, I landed right on my bottom, cushioned only slightly by the blanket I had set up earlier. Pain shot up my spine. I stayed still, holding my breath. Silence. No movement outside. No sudden footsteps rushing toward my room. I had survived. Phase 1, complete. Now, on to the next step, escaping this room. Alice believed I was fast asleep, which meant I had approximately an hour before she returned to check on me. Sweat trickled down my forehead as I crawled toward the door, my tiny limbs working harder than I'd like to admit. The crack of the door was just wide enough. Carefully, I pushed it open. Immediately, I heard it, the distant sound of running water. My dear mother was washing dishes, humming a soft tune as she worked. Good. That meant I had time. Full speed ahead. I pushed forward, slipping through the gap until I reached the other side. Looking up, I scanned the dimly lit room, and froze. A library. Stacks of books filled the space, some crammed onto towering shelves, others scattered messily across the floor. A candle flickered precariously on top of a wooden dresser, its flame dancing dangerously close to a pile of papers. That's not safe. Seriously, why does no one in this household care about fire hazards? One wrong move, and this entire place could burn to the ground. But despite my frustration with their reckless candle placement, something felt off. Why were so many books just lying around? Papers were scattered beside the shelves, crumpled and carelessly abandoned. Some books were stacked haphazardly, others left open as if someone had been reading them and simply walked away mid-sentence. What a mess. But still, success. I had made it. My gaze traveled across the shelves until my eyes locked onto a specific title. Firebending. What is this? I furrowed my tiny brows. Even though I had been transported to this world, I could read the language perfectly. The characters were completely unfamiliar, different from anything I had ever seen before, yet I understood them as if I had always known them. A strange, but welcome revelation. My eyes drifted across the shelves. Books in various colors lined the walls, some blue, some green, and some so aged that their wooden scent suggested they had been here for decades, if not longer. But the majority, red books, their spines laced with gold and crimson designs. Some were ornate and decorative, others expensive looking and well kept, a clear indication of importance. Did my father's promotion really make that much of an impact? I exhaled slowly, fingers grazing the cover of the book. Ever since I had discovered this place, I had been sneaking in every night, determined to learn more about this world, to understand where I had been reborn. And tonight would be no different. The hell, a flying bison. Once again, unable to reach the higher shelves, I scowled in frustration and turned my attention to the lower shelves instead. That's when my eyes landed on a thick, dust-covered book titled The World of Hybrid Beasts. With a sigh, I pulled it out and sat down, flipping through the pages. The more I read, the more absurd it became. Lion eagles, bear turtles, serpent wolves. My brow twitched. What kind of ridiculous world is this? Then, I turned another page, and froze. A massive, six-legged bison soared through the skies, its broad back carrying several people. I stared at the illustration, my grip on the book tightening. You've got to be kidding me. I shut the book with a quiet thump, exhaling slowly. This world is completely insane. And then, thump. A book fell from the shelf. My body tensed instantly, every muscle locking in place. I stayed completely still, listening. No movement outside. No footsteps approaching. After a brief hesitation, I crawled toward it, curiosity gnawing at me. Slowly, I pried open the cover. The leather creaked from age, dust swirling into the dim glow of the candle beside me. The pages crackled beneath my fingertips, brittle and fragile with time. And then, a map. It sprawled across the next 2 pages, intricately detailed, mountains clawing at the sky, rivers weaving like silver veins through emerald forests, deserts stretching endlessly into the horizon. But my gaze was drawn to the southwest. A cluster of jagged, blackened islands smoldered beneath a crimson inked label. The Fire Nation Isles. Volcanic peaks pierced the clouds, spewing tendrils of smoke that coiled toward the heavens. Rivers of molten rock carved through the land, their glow reflecting off obsidian-black shores. And at the heart of it all, a citadel, carved into the depths of an active volcano. Emberhold, the capital of this hellish domain. The surrounding sea shimmered with unnatural heat, their waves forever tinted by the glow of eternal infernos. According to the annotations scrawled along the margins, warriors clad in flame-forged armor walked these lands, wielding the very power of fire itself. Their ships, blackened sails, reinforced hulls, patrolled the molten waters, enduring volcanic storms that would reduce lesser vessels to cinders. It was said that only those born of flame could walk these lands unscathed. Outsiders who dared set foot here perished, either swallowed by the scorching heat, or captured by the merciless warlords who ruled the isles. I traced my fingertips along the map's edges, absorbing every detail. The Fire Nation Isles were not merely a place. They were a crucible, a land of power, war, and survival. And somehow, I knew this place would become important to me. Whether it was fate, chance, or something else entirely. I could feel it. In my past life, power was centralized through individuals, leaders, warriors, figures who seized control through strength. But here, rulership was not earned, it was inherited. That alone told me much about how this world functioned. I had discovered early on that this world was at war, a long, ongoing conflict that had shaped the land itself. Yet, despite the chaos, one undeniable fact stood out. The Fire Nation was winning, and that fact bothered me. By all logic, they shouldn't be. From what I had gathered, every other major power had geographical and elemental advantages that should have made conquest nearly impossible. The Earth Kingdom had unbreakable walls, monolithic defenses forged from the land itself, making sieges a nightmare for any invader. The northern and southern poles had civilizations built on the water, able to raise walls of ice or control the tides as natural barriers. Even the air nomads, from what I had read, lived beyond the reach of most armies, their temples carved into the highest peaks. And yet, the Fire Nation was winning. But why? They had no natural defenses, no geographical advantage. Their islands were isolated, their resources limited. By all means, they should have been the weakest of the four nations. Yet history said otherwise, and that meant one thing. They were winning through sheer power. But what kind of power? Only a vast chain of volcanic islands, rich in iron and coal, but lacking in the resources needed to sustain a century-long war. And yet, the Fire Nation had won. How? There had to be something more. A strategy, a secret, a weapon, because brute force alone wasn't enough to topple entire nations. And I intended to find out exactly how they did it. Yet, despite my focus, a strange unease crept over me. Even with the candle's warm glow flickering beside me, something about this room felt off. I scanned my surroundings, my gaze drifting toward the far wall. There, a poster loomed over the room. A man's face, unfamiliar and imposing, stared back at me. His features were sharp, his expression severe. He had neither the blue eyes of my father, nor any resemblance to my mother. Who is he? Before I could examine it further, I suddenly felt my body lift off the ground. A warm presence enveloped me as Alice scooped me into her arms. "Ah," she murmured, pressing me close. "I see my little Lucifer has found our great Fire Lord." I blinked, my mind racing. Fire Lord Ozai. Alice's voice was soft, but there was something strained beneath her words. "He is our supreme leader," she said, her arms tightening slightly around me. "The one who ensures our enemies are kept at bay." But unlike before, her words felt rehearsed, as if she were reciting a lesson rather than truly believing it. A flicker of hesitation passed through her green eyes before she spoke again. "Remember, son." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Honor must be upheld. Greatness must be chased." Then, quieter, almost as if the words were for herself. "Just like your father." I felt a chill run through me, not from fear, but from realization. This world's ideals, its rulers, its very foundation, everything was built upon fire, war, and honor. And whether I wanted to or not, I was now a part of it.